We're going to get started. There's someone else from our technology team that will be making sure that others are admitted. I want to welcome you all. I bring you greetings. My name is Janessa Williams, and I bring you greetings from the Bloomington-Normal Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Golene Lawrence has joined us. She serves as the chapter president. This is the next in our series of community conversations, and we thank you all for joining us to discuss achieving excellence in our schools with the school board presidents, Mark Wylie from District 87 and Amy Roser from Unit 5. We also have several board members and staff from both districts joining us on the call. We'll have brief opening remarks from Mark Wylie and Amy Roser, and then I will introduce our moderator who will lead the discussion with some questions that the Social Action Committee has presented to the board presidents prior to this meeting. If you have questions during the meeting, please type them in the chat, and there will be someone monitoring the chat from the committee who will then send them to the moderator during the call. The last 10 minutes or so of this meeting will be for those questions and answers from the community, and then we'll have brief wrap up. At this time, I'll ask Mark Wylie to introduce himself, highlighting for us why he decided to run for the school board.
Okay, thank you very much, Janessa. As she said, I have the honor and the privilege of serving as the school board president for District 87. I have with me Bridget Gibson, who I followed as president. She was president the past 2 years, and also Diane Wolf. Diane is our assistant superintendent of teaching and learning. In a lot of cases, most of you know Diane. She's been involved over 30 years in the education, especially here locally throughout McLean County, and has served in a variety of positions. A lot of times, Dr. Riley would have been here himself, but as many of you know, he just had surgery on Thursday. So we're trying to give him a few items off, and we have a big meeting tomorrow night. So again, why did I run for school board? Well, the saying is once a Raider, always a Raider. I graduated from BHS. I won't say what year because I'm probably the oldest member on this commit panel, but it was many years ago. And then also my wife and I have 6 children, 4 of which have graduated from BHS. The 5th is on track to graduate this coming spring. And then our last daughter is a 6th grader at Bloomington Junior High School. So I felt it was a way to hopefully give back a little bit from what all that we have received throughout the years from District 87.
Thank you, Mark. Next, I'll ask Amy Roser, president of the Unit 5 school board, to give her a brief introduction and highlight why she joined the school board.
Great, thanks, Janessa. There are a couple additional folks from Unit 5 who are on our call tonight who I want to make sure we introduce. I understand that Contrika Coleman, one of my fellow board members, is going to be joining us. I'm not sure if she's joined yet, but I know she's planning on it. Also, we have with us Dr. Kristen Weichel, our superintendent. Dr. Weichel's Zooming from meeting to meeting, so she'll be commenting on things after she gets settled in a safe location. We also have Dr. Crystal Shelvin, who's our Director of Diversity and Inclusion. I think that might be a familiar name to some of you on this call, and we couldn't be more excited to have her as a part of our Unit 5 family. And finally, we have Dana Brown, who is our Director of Communications. So I joined the school board because, that's probably one of the most difficult questions to answer tonight. I've spent 25 years, my professional career in education. I work at Illinois State University. About 10 years of that was in admissions, then enrollment management, and now my focus is on the student retention and helping get students to graduate side of things. So education, equity, and access has always been kind of part of what I do. And then when my kids started school, I joined the PTO, and I didn't really much care for the PTO, party planning stuff. And so there was this opportunity to join the Citizens Advisory Council, and I thought that sounds like something more that's up my alley. And so I joined the CAC and really enjoyed learning more about how K-12 schools are organized and the things that were administratively going on. So from there, there was an opportunity to join the board, and well, I put my name in the hat, and lo and behold, now I'm the Unit 5 board president. It is an amazing, glamorous job, but it is something that does fulfill my personal obligations of organization and service and the need to give back.
Well, thank you, Mark and Amy, for those introductions and sharing your reasons for wanting to be involved at the level you are with our young people in our community. Our moderator this evening is Meta Mickens-Baker. She is a talent acquisition specialist at State Farm Insurance Company. Her career has involved multiple locations and roles in human resources, management, and diversity and inclusion. Prior to State Farm, she put her Virginia Tech biochemistry degree to work with her first career as a middle school science teacher. When Meta left her education career, she made a personal commitment to help educators have the resources and support they needed to educate serving students well. She also served on the Citizens Advisory Council and as an elected member of the Unit 5 school board as ways to fulfill her commitment and make a positive contribution to our community. Meta served the Unit 5 community with 3 years on the CAC and then 17 years on the Unit 5 Board of Education, including time as president, vice president, and secretary. She currently works to benefit youth in our community by serving on the Unit 5 Educational Foundation Board, the Pratt Music Foundation Board, the Bloomington-Normal AXO Steering Committee. And for those who may not be familiar, AXO is an NAACP program that stands for Academic, Cultural, Technological, and Scientific Olympics. And she also conducts workshops on resume writing and interviewing. She is also an active member of the Bloomington-Normal Alumni chapter of our illustrious sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Meta and her husband, Keith Baker, have 2 adult sons, Cameron and Christian, who are both graduates of Unit 5. When Meta is not in meetings, you might find her running on Constitution Trail, riding her bike, or improving her swimming as she trains for sprint triathlons. At this time, I'm going to turn the conversation over to Meta Mickens-Baker. Thank you.
Thank you, Janessa. And thank you, Amy and Mark, for being a part of our conversation tonight. We are very excited to get to hear your insight and have you help educate our community about how you educate the children of our community and how the districts do that. So the first question is, would you please talk about the school board's responsibilities? Give a brief overview. And Amy, why don't we start with you? And then Mark, we'll let you fill in anything that you'd like to add.
Sure, thanks, Meta. School board's responsibility really focuses on setting the strategic direction and the policies for the district. And through that, that's how we help the district achieve the educational outcomes that are desired by the community. Our other primary responsibility is to supervise and hire the superintendent, and that is the board's one employee that the board directly works with. So the board really isn't much involved or aware of day-to-day operations of the school, is really dealing with things at a pretty high level. I think one of the other roles that's kind of unwritten about a board member is certainly to be an advocate and for the school and for the staff and for our students' successes, as well as to advocate for our school district within the different other governance bodies within our community. One of the other points that I want to make sure to raise is that board positions, when you run for school board, you're not required to indicate a political party preference. So school board positions are intentionally designed across our state to be nonpartisan. And so I think that's really something to keep in mind.
Thank you very much, Amy. Mark, what would you like to add? Mark, are you on mute?
Muted.
First of all, I'd like to say that I agree with everything Amy said and would echo that. One other thing to add, I think, along with, like she mentioned, that school board members we do not run as a party, is that we are a unit, cohesive unit, meaning that the board makes the decisions, not one person on the board. And Unit 5 just went through not too long ago. We are in the process of doing the most important thing that a board does. Since most of you know Dr. Wylie is retiring at the end of this academic year, we are doing that for the first time in 12 years. We'll be looking for a new superintendent.
Thank you both. Now, I have one question that I know the answer to, but many people may not. We've been hearing in the news in some states about school board pay and how that's being handled or withheld. What in the state of Illinois are school board members paid for their service?
If you're asking me, no, we are not. Yeah, we do get a t-shirt, we do get shirts every now and then, but no, we are not paid.
Thank you very much. And that is a question I think people, especially if they move from other states, may not realize that in Illinois, the money that's available goes to educate students, not to pay school board members. So thank you very much. So let's go to our second question, and it has to do with community engagement. How would you define community engagement within the school, and what is your board doing to facilitate this? And Mark, why don't we let you start this time?
Okay, there's several ways for community engagement. And Diane could tell you if I don't do an adequate job as far as answering every single way we do it. But the most important way for we do community engagement is through our websites, through Skyward that the individual parents are inward and Remind. Another way we do it is we have licensed social workers at all our schools. We have 5 at BJHS plus family facilitators, and at BHS we have a social worker and 5 counselors and 2 family facilitators. The other thing is when you talk about engagement, the other night I was at another conference, and one of the other panel members said it very well, that think about that you're taking a new job. Within the first 9 weeks, are you going to get to know anybody you work with? Are you going to get to know your supervisor? Are you going to get to know your fellow coworkers? And what they were getting at was that in the first 9 weeks to school, i.e. the first quarter, it's important for those of us, and I can speak both as a parent and a school board member, to help take the lead to get to know our kids' teachers, especially as you get to the junior high and high school. It's difficult to expect these teachers to reach out to all the students individually when they easily could have 100 to 200 students total with all the different sections. And I thought that, and they said, if you think about it, when you start a new job, you're going to find out who the people are that you work with within the first couple weeks. And then that being said, also then in case there's an issue later on, you know who the teacher is and the teacher knows who you are. And so community engagement, I think, is both ways. I would like to encourage everyone, if they do have students, to reach out to their teachers.
Thank you very much. Amy, can I give the same question to you? What
Sure.
is Unit 5 doing around community engagement?
Sure. I think, parents are such a critical part of that community engagement, and really, our elementary schools in particular become like little micro communities within our larger community. And so we really think that community engagement starts with that parent involvement in their students' education. Now we recognize that that's not a comfortable thing for a lot of our parents. For example, my father never graduated high school. So anything when it came to going to the school was something that he was extremely uncomfortable with and avoided. And I didn't recognize until later in life that it was because he didn't graduate high school that he wasn't engaged with me in my education. So one of the things that we really, as a district, work to do is to find ways to make it comfortable and welcoming for our parents and families to be involved in their child's education. And we're not perfect at that. And so I think we really rely on groups of this nature who can help us and identify ways that we can provide opportunities for our families to be such a critical part of that community, because we know that when kids see that their parents or family members or loved ones are with them in the school, that motivates them to learn.
Thank you very much. Thank you both very much. So I'm going to follow that question with one that's related. How can the community best help our schools achieve educational excellence? Amy, why don't we start with you this time?
Right. I think I really want to emphasize the things in our community that that are contributing to student success, and piggybacking on my last response. Many of the mentoring programs and the support programs that our MPHC organizations are providing, when that parent isn't comfortable being a part of the school environment, the work that your groups are doing with 100 Black Men or the Kappas at Evans or the Jewel Foundation, some of those opportunities where we can mentor our young students and catch them to engage early in the educational process is really so important to helping improve overall educational outcomes for our students. So I really want to highlight that. I think the other way that I would recommend that's important for community engagement is to want to be participating in things like this and panels and being knowledgeable and aware of the things that are going on in your school district and how you can be engaged.
Sorry, I was talking on mute. Amy, thank you very much. Mark, how about District 87?
One thing that I want to point out that we have 174 days that we have students in session. So that leaves, almost 200 days that they're not in session every year. And it's 6.5 to 7 hours a day. So a lot of what affects this is what happens outside the schools. Amy alluded a little bit to some of this when she mentioned some of the mentoring that we've partnered with several organizations with. Another thing that's important for most every district is to have high quality childcare outside of this, in our society where a lot of times the parents, or most times the parents are both working, or if it's a single parent household, they're working. And so we need to be able to support them by having good childcare. another thing that's an issue with us is we want to try to have affordable housing. We found out that if students can stay in the same school, at least throughout the full academic year, they do better, so that students don't have to move. And I know that's something that's been worked on throughout our community. Again, I would want to compliment those of you on this call because you're showing your interest. And I think that shows, by showing interest in this especially, that improves excellence for the individual students.
Thank you both. Can I make a plug for the Promise Council as well?
Sure.
The organization that works with both school districts and gathers needs for students, but also cheerleaders for students to really be there as 100, maybe let's call it 1,000 caring adults, showing students that their education is important. And that helps to start the school year or start the semester, but also helps to provide for needs that maybe a family can't meet at that particular time. So you didn't ask me, but I couldn't help but toss that in. So let's go to another question.
And one item, thank you for bringing that up. And don't tell my middle daughter that I forgot to mention it. She's been involved with Promise Council all 4 years. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
You know, and I would say, Mark, it's awesome to see some of our young graduates coming back and supporting the students behind them. And I know we have a lot of peer mentoring that happens within the schools as well. So we love that the students are learning to be community and support each other very young in both school districts. So my next question is, what is the process for parents, students, or community members to address questions or concerns to the district or to the board? I think, Amy, you started before, so Mark, I'll go to you first.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Thank you for that question. And that comes up to me several times. I'm sure it does to Amy and her school board members, as fellow members as well. What we tell people is start at the low end, not the low end, but the end where you would be more likely to know people. Start with your teachers. And if you have an issue there, then go to the principal. And then keep moving up the line. Then for us, it'd be the assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, i.e. that's Dr. Wolf. And then after that, it would be Dr. Wylie. The reason being is that a lot of times you can get a question answered pretty quickly by one of these professionals. And again, if for some reason one of them doesn't have the answer, obviously the school board's here, but I will say that a lot of times if I get a question, I will go to Dr. Wylie and say, I've heard this concern, and he'll then answer it, and then it'll filter down. So they might even get a quicker answer.
Thank you, Mark. Amy, did you want to add to that?
Right. Yeah, I think Mark's spot on in that starting at the closest point where the communication needs to be addressed. So either with the teacher or the principal or the individual in the school that's involved, if it's a coach or a coordinator of a program or something of that nature. But starting there, because that's really where the relationship is most important and also the person that can provide you direct context about what they're seeing as well, right? So going and starting that communication with that person, and you know, it's so funny I say that, but you know, I'm just as nervous as the next person to go and talk to my student, talk to a teacher about something that I see in students. So it's scary for everyone, but it's really important. In the times that I've done that, it's certainly been very effective. But sometimes that's not where the understanding is. So then certainly following up on the administrative levels through the principal or through the district office is more than appropriate. I think the final thing I'd recommend is that if you don't feel comfortable sharing that situation with a teacher, Unit 5 has a confidential concern resolution process on our website. So families can use that to fill out a form to have a situation investigated and to have research done to see how to resolve a particular situation. as a board member, when you come to me with individual situations, my response usually is, who have you talked to about this, right? Have you talked to the principal? Have you talked to the teacher? Because I don't know the day-to-day details on those situations, and nor is that's my role. I would delegate that often to Dr. Weichel and ask her or a member of her staff to look into the specifics of a situation. But certainly it is our job as a board member to make sure that you get a response and an answer. And I always want to know when you don't feel like you've gotten that answer.
Thank you. And I'm going to follow up with a little bit more. If they want to come to a school board meeting and talk about an issue and make a comment, what are the guidelines for comment in your two districts? So Amy, since you were last, you're still on screen. What are the guidelines for comments for Unit 5? And then Mark will go to you with the same thing.
Right. For public comment, we welcome public comment first and foremost, and it's an important part of governance of a public meeting, right? Is to allow an opportunity for the public to come and to speak and present information from their perspective to the board. We require that you sign in prior to the meeting starting, to sign in to give public comment during that meeting. During our public comment period, then on our agenda, we have each person state their name and spell their name for the official record, and then they are limited to 3 minutes to speak their time. Certainly, things have to abide by our appropriateness policy. You can't use, inappropriate language. I'm not coming up with all the right words, but we don't want profanity. We don't want just real accusations and that type of thing. There is an expectation of professionalism as you're giving those public comments as well.
Thank you, Amy. Mark, how about for District 87?
Well, ours are very, very similar. The only difference I would say is that ours is 5 minutes, is currently 5 minutes to speak and not 3, but we have the same, you sign up before the start of the meeting. And like me mentioned so well, that we do expect professionalism. And we do want to let everyone know that it is public comment. It's not a public forum. And so by public comment, we listen to what you say, but we don't respond at that meeting. Normally that is handed off then to an administrator to follow up if it's something that, an individual concern. But what we do is we listen, and I know Unit 5 does the same thing.
Thank you very much. So our next question. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some more recent issues, the pandemic. And now that we are hopefully coming out of the pandemic, can you talk a little about how learning loss that students may have experienced from being in remote learning, how is that being assessed as to whether or not there is a loss of learning, and then what's being done if there is to help students catch up? And how is equitable technology access being addressed? So kind of 3 things. Learning loss, how is that being assessed? What's being done to help students catch up? And then how is equitable technology access being addressed? Mark, do you want to start?
Well, I'm going to ask Diane to help with this one because this is definitely a day in and day out question more than a board question. So Diane, or Dr. Wolf, I should mention your name, Dr. Wolf, not Diane. So if we could let her speak on this, that would be great.
Thank you. Dr. Wolf?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for letting me be part of today. Well, the pandemic did bring in a new title called learning loss. And for us, we try to stay away from that as much as we can, because we know that students actually gained a lot of learning during the pandemic, but it wasn't maybe the traditional learning that we all are used to, going into school and learning what the teacher had planned. What we really found during the pandemic was that our students became incredibly technology savvy, and not just with their iPhones and their video games. They really learned how to use technology down to our pre-K students on a learning device, which I think is our new normal. And we have a generation of students that we need to embrace how to use that technology in a way that can advance their learning. So some of the things that District 87 did was we were fortunate, of course, last summer to be able to go into having face-to-face learning again. You know, we started back in District 87 in October, and we added students throughout the year. But in the summer, we had a very robust summer programming. And this was one of the things that we brought in community. You asked earlier about community partnerships. And that's how we built our summer programming, was that we invited in our community because we had received additional funding, and we wanted to make sure that we were a good partner to our nonprofits. And so we developed a program that was for our students to help bridge that gap, is how I'm kind of trying to think of it in my mind, is bridge the gap of being at home learning to getting back into school on a regular basis. And I think the second question was a great one about how do we know where kids are? Well, here's the thing. Every single year when students come into our classrooms, we as educators are asking that question, where are you? Because we know that during the summer, traditionally, we have some of that learning loss, just because if you don't do something for 3 months, I don't care what it is, knitting, riding a bike, or learning algebra, you're going to fall back a little bit. So we, along with our colleagues in Unit 5, use local assessments that we have that are standardized so that they're normed, they're looked at across the country to say where are our kids at. And what we're finding in schools, and this is pretty traditional right now, or typical, I should say, across the country, is that students did have loss of academic learning, but they're coming up to speed faster than we would anticipate. So it's kind of like the coming back into school and still having to wear masks and having to socially distance and self-regulate and not take a snack whenever you wanted to. Or my very favorite, I had a student say to me, now I have to pay attention. I can't turn off my camera and I just don't know what to do. And I said, all right, I can help you with that. So those are all certain things we're doing. And the very last thing about technology is that District 87, we've provided at-home internet service pre-pandemic, but we did up our game and we provided that to 500 families, which represented about 1,000 students. And we also went one-to-one from pre-K to second grade, all had personalized iPads. And then 3rd through 12th grade had Chromebooks. And that was something that was really interesting because all of our colleagues, our educators, we all had to learn how to do our day-to-day business on a computer. But I'm really happy today. I was in a school, and as I was walking around, I saw that we're still using technology to advance learning. And that's pretty exciting for a curriculum person to say that, you know what, we learned. I think that the role of education is forever changed. And if we don't listen to what we learned during the pandemic, then shame on us. And we learned a lot, and I'm really excited to see the new avenues that are going to be opening up for our students. So All right, I talked too long, but Unit 5 and 87, we partner a lot together and we share a lot of ideas together. And so I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
Dr. Wolf, thank you so much. That was a very rich response. So thank you very much. We learned a lot. No, you did not talk too long. You gave us a lot of really rich information. So thank you very much. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add from Unit 5's perspective?
I do, but I'm going to turn it first over to Dr. Wycle to let her give a response to this first.
Thank
Sure.
you. Welcome, Dr. Wycle.
Good evening. Thank you. So similar to District 87, we use a variety of assessments, and some are more formal versus informal in nature. So informal would be just those observations that our educators are making in the classroom, watching students like work out a problem, whether it be an academic problem or an interpersonal difficulty or challenge that they're facing, ranging to those formalized assessments where we are able to compare how our students are doing compared to other students across the state and the country. So that provides our staff members with information, so that way they can really target where are our students academically, but also through that social emotional lens. We know, some of our students were fully remote last year, which means the last time they were physically in school was during the 1920 school year. And with that comes a lot of potentially trauma that our students and families encountered during that time. And even if they didn't experience trauma, it's just out of the norm of being in a school setting, in a classroom with their peers, using those interpersonal skills with real in-person humans versus, connecting over the computer or a game or something like that. So our staff, I think like a lot of educators across the country, they're very talented in being able to differentiate instruction, which means they're able to take, this is what I want all of our students to learn, but based on each student's individual needs, strengths, skill sets, they're able to change that just enough to be able to try to reach that child and help them grow in their learning, again, whether it be academic or social emotional. As far as, the equitable technology, we too, when COVID hit, the district had ordered tablets for our students in K2 settings, and then Chromebooks for 3 through 5, and our junior high and high school students had already had one-to-one devices being Chromebooks. Because of the restrictions of an early learning grant, we couldn't order new devices for them, but we were able to provide devices to any family that needed one for their early learning youngster. So everyone had devices that needed those, and then we provided hotspots to our students and families who maybe didn't have internet or reliable internet in order to engage with their instruction and learning. So we continue to work with our students and families and community partners who might need some assistance for that equitable technology access.
Thank you, Dr. Wycle. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add, or would you like me to go to the next question?
I think we're ready. Dr. Wycle did a fabulous job.
Thank you. So our next question, and I think this was touched upon a little in the answers that you just gave, but of the $1.6 billion that Illinois received from the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds, ESSER, did Unit 5 at District 87, how much did they receive, and how were the funds used, or how will they be used? Dr. Wolf, I see you nodding already. Oh, Dr. Wycle, why don't you start? Thanks.
Okay, sorry, I was going to say I can start. So I believe the first round of money, I believe it was around 1.5 million, if I remember correctly. And yes, we used those initial dollars to purchase tablets, Chromebooks, and then PPE equipment. The second round of dollars, we received approximately 6 million, and we used those funds to pay for summer school for students in grades kindergarten through 12th grade this past summer. whereas traditionally we've only offered summer school being like a credit recovery for students who are needing to make up credit at the secondary level. So we've earmarked, as I said, we had summer school in the summer of 21. We've earmarked summer school for the summer of 22 and likely the summer of 23. We upgraded our air quality using something called needlepoint bipolar ionization, which has a high effective rate in killing airborne viruses. So we put those on all of our HVAC units in all of our school settings. And then with our ESSER III dollars, we're receiving about $13 million. We are really targeting that on providing interventions. So going to like even the last question, like what are we doing about any learning loss or social emotional support our students need? You know, we've earmarked money to reduce class size, to hire academic interventionists, to address reading, math difficulties that our students are facing, to work with our students who are struggling socially, emotionally, or facing significant mental health challenges. And then of course, we continue to look at ways that we can improve our air quality efficiency in how we're utilizing our air systems, because the more efficient, bright that our environments can be, the better the learning environment for our students are. And then we still have some earmarked for PPE, you know, masks right now since they're being mandated. We provide masks, you know, for students who walk in, try to walk into school without one each day, and providing some money for testing for students. So that way we can keep them in school to the greatest extent possible if they're identified as a close contact for someone with COVID.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you mentioning too, the services for students who might have to be quarantined for a period of time. So thank you. Dr. Wolf, I see you've gone off mute. So would you like to respond to that question as well?
Sure. So it's interesting because our dollar amounts are almost perfectly aligned. And I did not realize that. So thank you for that. The very first round, when we first received that first CARES money, one of the, and I want to wrap this answer around to what does a Board of Education do, which was your first question, because this is a perfect example that our Board of Education was very thoughtful when we received the notice of the funding, talking about it and getting us guidance on where they wanted that money to go. And that's really helpful when you are representing a community. You know, we had a community problem, and it was wonderful to have 7 people giving us input, and we kept their priorities for all 3 rounds, which was students first, safety first, student learning, and our staff safety as well. So our first round went, much like Unit 5's, to technology and PPE. I think all of us in education, I can honestly tell you, I never took a class. I didn't even know what PPE was, but I am telling you now, we can talk about air quality, and I can tell you a whole heck of a lot about food distribution. So that was the first round. And then the second round is when we really started looking at our instructional supports, and we put that money into things like instructional technologies, trainings for our teachers, our internet that I spoke of earlier. We also put in a piece about food reimbursement, food service reimbursement. And why I want to bring that up is because, as you may or may not know, for the last 2 years, all students in all public schools in the US can receive free lunch and breakfast. And this is something new. Well, what that did was, it's awesome. We all love it, but it left a little bit of a difference in that bottom line, because we do have students that would pay for extra food and things like that. And so we did a little bit to cover those costs so that we could take that off of our local budget. Then our ESSER III money really went to this robust summer programming. We talk, when we talk about quarantines, we have a lot of substitutes, and we have a substitute problem right now that we need people that are willing to do that community engagement at a level of coming in and substituting. Our students are awesome, and it is a great job. We train you, it is fulfilling, and you walk away with no work. It's a great position, but we need to pay for all those quarantines that we've had and substitutes. And then the last thing is we put the money into people to help our students succeed. So we added our 3 parent facilitators. We added 2 additional social workers in addition to the 8 we already had. We added a director of elementary education to really look at that pre-K-5 to put a focus that has paid off already in some of our task forces that we're working on. And then the last thing that we did was that we made sure that we had the right supplies for our custodial staff to be able to complete their job as we continue to hold forth a lot of the practices that we got when we first went into the pandemic. So the money has been well spent. And truly, it has been a blessing to our school districts because it took a burden off of our, I can't even think about what would have happened, to be honest with you. So I'm just going to say, I'm glad we have it.
Sorry, talking on mute. I am glad too. It has
Meta,
certainly
I wanna
made a
add-
difference. Okay, Mark, yes, sure.
Yeah, one thing, and I think Dr. Wolf will say if I'm wrong on this, but one thing I think everyone needs to know, but that these funds are reimbursable funds, meaning that we have to spend the money first on these programs in order to get them. We couldn't use them for, making everyone, I've heard, well, you have an existing deficit. Why don't you help out with the deficit? That's not what these funds were for. So that's why they're for basically the new programs and everything else that both people before me talked about. And I think that's something we all need to realize that, again, these are reimbursable funds for other projects and not just existing items.
Mark, you make a really good point, and I'll add that throughout education funding and how monies are spent, many dollars are allocated to specific funds and specific purposes. And unlike our own checkbook, we can't just use it for something else we'd like to use it for. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So there was one question that I had that you've actually already addressed. So I'll just mention it for the audience, but I think they'll realize that they've heard the answer. And that was about what resources are available to address the psychological impact of the pandemic. And I appreciate that you've each spoken about some of that social emotional learning and ways you're helping students just to get used to being back in the classroom and the interpersonal interaction that maybe they didn't have during the pandemic period. Did anyone have anything else in particular you wanted to mention about that psychological impact?
Yeah, one of the additional things that we did in Unit 5 with the ESSER funds was add family coordinators. So we now have family coordinators that touch all of our elementary schools and all of our junior highs. And so these family coordinators really help serve as that cultural broker between the school and the family. And what we find is that sometimes our families will share things with our family coordinators that maybe they're uncomfortable sharing with the principal or with their teacher. So it really helps to ensure that the family and the home environment is set up for success so that the student, when they come to school, can focus on learning and can and not have to worry about things back home. So our family coordinators have really just been vital in helping reduce some of that stress and psychological impact.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Wolf, I know you mentioned that in District 87, that had been part of your investment of the funds as well. So thank you, Amy, for adding kind of how Unit 5 had addressed the same situation. So there's one question that came in, well, it's kind of two. They're both for District 87. In your search for a new superintendent, What specific qualifications will you be looking for? And how can the community provide input to this critical decision?
I guess that's for me to answer then, isn't it?
Mhm, yeah.
How we've already had a good amount of community impact. We had a series of forums with, I think we had 8 different forums, several of which were with community leaders that we asked their input. We have hired a search firm, and they took into account what the different community leaders said in looking at our different qualifications for our new superintendent. So we've already had a lot of good input, and I would like to thank those again. I did thank them originally, but the people who were involved, for example, the 100 Black Men was involved, PTOs were involved, in addition to a lot of different school people. As far as qualifications, it's interesting. You're always looking for the right fit. One of the important qualifications, obviously, is communication skills. Any superintendent, and I know Dr. Weichel, maybe you could tell me better what qualifications a superintendent always has, but I think being able to communicate with different groups, be it the teachers, be it the principals, being parents, being students, being community leaders, as you can see, they all have, we're all hopefully working together, but we have different inputs and different concerns. Obviously, we are looking for someone with some experience in the education field, whether or not they be an existing superintendent or be an assistant superintendent who's worked in another district. We're looking for someone, another qualification that will eventually have to occur is the person will have to move here. If they're, they'll have to live in District 87. That's pretty common in most districts. I could go on, but those are want to emphasize that we also want someone who, in addition to the communication, you can say consensus, someone who can help bring consensus. And as our district is, as many people know, our district is is the 3rd most diverse district in the state. So we want someone who can work with a variety of people. And that's probably as important as anything.
Thank you very much. And it is 5 minutes to 7. So I'm going to say thank you to all of you, Amy, Mark, Dr. Weichel, Dr. Wolf, for contributing to our conversation tonight, to everyone who's been on the call. I'm going to pass it back to our committee, to Janessa, for the wrap up.
Well, thank you, Meta, for moderating this, and to Mark Wylie and Amy Roser in your roles as president of the respective school boards for agreeing to participate in this community conversation, along with Bridget Gibson, Diane Wolf, Kristen Welke, Crystal Shelvin, and Dana Brown, who have different roles in the respective school districts. We appreciate your input and all that you're doing in your commitment to the youth in our community. I also want to thank everyone in the community who took time out from your busy schedules to join us this evening. I also want to highlight a couple of upcoming community conversations. The next one will be with the new Bloomington Police Chief. We had a date, but due to scheduling conflicts, we're going to have to reschedule that. So please do keep your eyes open for that. We also are planning to do a community conversation with the mayors of Bloomington and Normal, as well as members of the town and city councils. If there are any community conversations that you would like for the Social Action Committee to host, please don't hesitate to let me or any member of the Bloomington-Normal Alumni chapter know, and they will pass that information along, and we'll try to make that happen. In closing, I want to recognize the members of the Social Action Committee, our chair, Renee Thompson, who couldn't be with us this evening due to a family situation. also Janice Kroom and Linda Foster. I'd like to recognize our technology chair, Carol De La Cruz, for setting up the Zoom and making sure that we all could get here and had the right links and things go on without a hitch. So, and also again to our moderator, Meta Mickens-Baker. When you exit this meeting, a brief evaluation will pop up. We ask that you take 2 to 3 minutes to provide your feedback on this session so that it will help us plan for upcoming conversations. Again, I want to say thank you to everyone who participated this evening. Good night and stay safe.
Thank you again.